the Instructor Podcast with Terry Cook, talking with leaders, innovators, experts and game changers about what drives them.
Welcome to the Instructor Podcast Short Lessons. In these bite-sized episodes, I dive back into the archives and pull out a nugget of inspiration or information to get you thinking. Today we're heading back to September of 2021 and we're digging into an Instructor Podcast Premium episode, the Standards Check Checklist. Ray Seagrave was the guest as we took a deep dive into, did the trainer identify the pupil's learning goals and needs? Now, I've included a link to the full episode in the show notes, and if you're not a premium member, you can listen via a 3 weeks trial. But just before you do, allow me to direct you towards the Instructor Podcast website where you'll find all the previous episodes, a ton of free resources, and more details about the Instructor Premium membership, which currently has that 1 week free trial that is completely free. So head over to www.theinstructorpodcast.com. But for now, enjoy this short lesson. So if we look at the first section there, which is, did the trainer identify the pupil's learning goals and needs? So I'm going to kind of throw this over to you a little bit, just to ask us initially to put your spin on that, if you like, if you could sort of expand on it and tell us how you would interpret that rather than just that one sentence. Did the trainer identify the pupil's learning goals and needs?
Yeah, I mean, it's if you think about, everyone's unique, and we all learn in a different way. We're all respond in different ways. We all have different backgrounds. We all grow and develop in our learning in a different pace. And being able to, first of all, understand where our pupil currently is, the level that they're at, that then starts the point for the training, doesn't it? Also understand a little bit about them, how they maybe struggle with some things, how they get on with some things easier. So, and what they might need from you. That's what that statement's all about. Their learning goals is about helping them set a goal itself, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But their needs around what they want to try to achieve, and then how you can help them with that. So initially, you're going to have a goal setting conversation with them. And you're going to try and establish, what they're capable of around what they'd like to achieve, and from that, you will come out the pupil's level of ability and what they need, and particularly, what help they might need from you. Well, I was just about to say, so establishing the goal is important. What do they want to develop? What do they want to improve? What do they want to achieve? And how can you help them with that? Something specific.
Yeah, I think that it's almost making sure we agree with that. So it's getting the goal out of them, but ensuring that we agree with that. And I would imagine a lot of that is going on previous experience as well. So we all, I mean, you probably hear this as much as I do when we talk about coaching, when you'll hear the instructors say, well, you ask the student what they want to do, and it's a second lesson and they want to do motorways. It's taking the previous stuff. So if you do get your student who does get a bit nervous because there's an examiner sat in the back, even if they're not examining them, they're still potentially going to get a little bit nervous themselves and says something a bit different, like, I don't know, motorways that they're not ready for.
Yeah. You
would then have to almost massage that into a more suitable goal, wouldn't you?
Well, I tell you what, isn't that a great goal? To do motorways is a great goal. It might not be not be something that they could achieve with their current level of experience yet, but then you'd go into a conversation about breaking that down. What would need to happen for you to be able to do that, and then breaking that down into elements, that you can then build up to them doing a motorway lesson at some point. So that the structure of a lesson nearly always starts with a recap, doesn't it? You've got a recap on what's previously been done on the previous lesson. Where the pupil's currently at, and that itself is, helping to understand where their level is and what their needs might be from a previous lesson that you've had with them. And then you go into that conversation about, helping them set a goal. But in that point you touched on there about, will a pupil, a pupil might say, I'd like to do motorways. And If that's far out of their current ability, you will be having that conversation with them that helps them understand where they currently are and what they would need to do and how you could help them get there. Because and if you haven't, I tend to find those sorts of conversations happen. It's like people say, "Oh, when can I book my test?"
Yeah.
And it's a similar sort of thing going on, isn't it? Or when can I do this and when can I do that? And if it is far outside of their current ability, then in my view, something's not right. Something's not right with the level of rapport that you've got with them. Something's not right with their understanding around what the standard is, maybe, and where they are now and what they would need to achieve and what the path is, the journey that they've got to take to get there.
Yeah.
And that all needs to happen, So when you are aligned with a pupil's thoughts and a pupil's aligned with your thoughts, when they turn around and say, "I'm not ready for that yet, am I?" And that's exactly what you think. Yeah.
I definitely want to touch back on that, but I think a key thing there, and I think you almost touch on this, is it's almost the difference between a standards check and a real lesson. Now, a standards check should be a reflection of a real lesson, clearly. But with a standards check, I would imagine in most cases, you've almost done a lesson beforehand. You're not going to meet the student at the test centre and get in the car and go from there in most cases. So often you'll have done the lesson prior to the standards check. So if we're speaking solely about a standards check, that student is going to have a good idea of what they were doing because they've discussed it 10 minutes ago. And that doesn't mean planning the lesson. It means recapping the previous one and going from there. So it's almost less pressure in that sense.
Yeah, that's it. Exactly right. So when you're meeting the examiner and you're giving them an overview of your pupil, you're also giving them an overview of what you're currently working on and maybe a bit of a scale that they've currently scaled themselves at. And then the examiner's going to join you in the back and you're going to do the second half of the lesson pretty much. So it is going to be a continuation on.
Yeah. In terms of a real lesson, if I don't like that term, but just to differentiate the two, in terms of a real lesson, I suppose it would apply to a standards check actually. How much, with regards to the recap, how much do you recap and how much do you get the students to recap? Because my first question is always asking the students to reflect on what they did last lesson. I'll ask them, can you remember what the focus was last lesson? Can you remember what we did? Can you remember what you would, and go down that path? But now and again, they'll occasionally think, well, can't you remember? And then I have to explain to them, no, well, I can, but I'm trying to get out of you. So I'm just wondering, is that the route you take, or when you recap the lesson, do you recap it and then get their input afterwards?
Well, I would always recommend to an ADI or PDI that they recap it with the pupil. I always think, do you know when the door opens and the pupil gets in, they're in a classroom.
Right.
So they're now, they're now in a learning environment and you're helping them recall what they've just done from a last lesson to get them into the learning mode, the learning mood, aren't you?
Yeah.
They might have just come out of work or they might have just come out of a different situation. They might have not thought about driving for a week. And then all of a sudden they get in the car. So you're now switching them on to, okay, this is now a focus on you, your development. So helping them recap. I'm not saying, you're going to get, and yes, I have that experience myself where they said, oh, I can't remember what I did last week. So you tend to then throw them a few lines, do you recall when we did this? What went well there? Or it may be that you've already had a goal setting conversation at the recap at the end of the last lesson. And you may ask the question about, do you recall what the goals were going to be for this lesson? And they go, oh, no, I can't remember what they are. Would it help you if I just mentioned this or talked about that? You're trying to bring it out of them. So it gets them back into driving mode. Because the next question you're then going to want to ask is that still what you'd like to do?
The Instructor Podcast with Terry Cook, talking with leaders, innovators, experts and game changers about what drives them.